Photoshop, for those of you who are not familiar with the program, is an editing tool. It's also from the Adobe family. So you'll notice that the interface is quite similar to in Illustrator. And in landscape architecture, Photoshop is typically used to create perspective visuals that visually describe the sense of place or the environment from like a human scale perspective. And today I'm going to go through the basic tools and simple rendering techniques in Photoshop. But keep in mind that there's no like one specific way of achieving a perspective. People use different styles. Everyone has their own style of doing their renderings. But your ultimate goal is to create a rendering that is visually appealing and cohesive. Okay, so just a couple of tips before we get started about using Photoshop. Number one is before you begin working on a drawing in Photoshop, have your panel the layout kind of set. Okay, because Photoshop, when you're editing in Photoshop, it's a raster image. So let's say you created this beautiful rendering in Photoshop, a perspective. But the size is a lot smaller than you expected and you have to stretch it, it's going to get very pixelated and it's going to ruin your drawing altogether. Okay, so have an idea of how big you want your drawing to be first. Okay, typically professors will be more specific about how big your panels should be or how big your drawing should be, so make sure you follow that. Number two, avoid adding text in Photoshop. Okay, actually never add text in Photoshop. Always add text afterwards in InDesign or Illustrator, but not in Photoshop. Okay, and that's similar to the first reason. It's Photoshop is a raster image editor, so if you need to scale it for some reason, you're going to scale your text as well, and if it's not coherent with your other drawings, then you're going to have to start all over. Okay. And thirdly, always be aware of which color mode you are working in. So similar to the Illustrator that I talked about last week, CMYK is for printing and RGB is for viewing it on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to show you in a moment when you open a new file in Photoshop where you can change CMYK to RGB and vice versa. And lastly, I'm going to show you how to bring images in from, let's say, Google and edit them so that you can add them into your perspective. And when you're downloading these images, make sure they're very high quality. Okay, you don't want to download a tiny image and then have to blow it up and stretch it and it's all pixelated and use that in your drawings. Okay, so what we typically have as landscape architects is an image bank. Okay, and an image bank is where it's basically a collection of images in a folder or a series of folders that contain all of your edited and polished raster images. So basically, when you download these images of people, of trees, street furniture, whatever other landscape elements, you don't want to use it for just one drawing and then delete them. You want to keep them in kind of like a folder or a series of folders so you can reuse them in your future projects. And what that does, it saves your time tremendously in your future projects. The only fallback is that right now, because you need to start creating your image bank, it takes a little bit of time for you to have this library of images, but it's a lot easier for you to start your image bank when you're in first year, so that by the time you're in fourth year working on your capstone projects, you have an amazing set of images that you can work with, and you can just copy and paste it into your perspectives rather than having to edit them, which takes a lot more time. Okay, so create an image bank folder in your hard drive, in your computer, wherever you can keep it safe, and then start collecting images. Okay, so to create a new document in Photoshop, it'll give you like a blank workspace when you first open Photoshop. So go to File and New, It's very similar to Illustrator. You can determine the width and height of your document. So let's say you're going to use 11 by 17 again. Okay, set your units properly. And when it comes to resolution, it's okay for your resolution to be a little low if you're going to be putting it up on a website or something. But if you're going to be printing it, always stick to 200, somewhere between 200 and 300. Okay. Obviously, 300 is better, but the higher your resolution, the bigger your file is going to be. Okay, just keep that in mind. So I'm just going to keep mine to 300 for now. And here's the color mode that I was talking about earlier. So RGB is for screen purposes, CMYK is for printing. Your background content can either be white or transparent, completely up to you. I'm just going to keep it white for now. Okay, and you can name your say perspective, your file, and then click OK. So this is the workspace that you're given. And similar to, or actually the exact same as Illustrator, you're going to be given a layers panel. If you can't see it, it's the same kind of process. Go to Windows and scroll down to Layers. Okay. So for this assignment, as Nadia mentioned, you're going to be sketching your perspective first and then bringing it into your computer. So let's say you have your image ready to scan on your scanner, and you have the scanner connected to your computer. You're going to go to File and Import. Okay, and import images from device. Okay, and then it'll give you the option to it'll connect to the scanner or the printer and let you import it straight into Photoshop. Okay. But let's say, for instance, that you do have your image already scanned in onto your computer. You can just go to File and Open. Okay, and find your image. Actually, trying to look for one with my trees. Okay, anyway, I'm going to open an image. So if you're not sketching, you probably will be working in like a 3D modeling software somewhere and then just grabbing a scene from your model and then bringing it into Photoshop. So in that case, you're going to open your image. You're going to use your selection tool, which is the dotted kind of rectangular or square icon at the top of your tool. Okay, you're going to select your entire image. Okay, and on your keyboard, you can do Control-C to copy, and then bring it into your original document. Okay, now this image is a little small, and because this is your base image, you can stretch it. As long as you can still see the details, you can stretch it a little bit. To do that, you're going to press Command-T or Control-T for PC users. Okay, and that's going to give you this bounding box, okay, with an option to resize. So press Shift so you know you're stretching it or resizing it proportionately, and resize it. Okay, maybe I don't need the edges so much, so maybe I'll just... You can go off the page, it's okay, as long as you don't need that area to show. Just make sure your image is being resized proportionately and you should be good. Okay, so those are two ways you can bring in an image. If you're going to scan, you can go to File, Import, Images from Device, or if the image is already on your computer, you can go to File and Open. Just a few comments about the tools. A lot of the tools are similar to Illustrator, but a lot of them are actually not. So you can experiment with them. One important thing to note is this crop tool here. Okay, let's say you have your image, but you have these kind of like outstanding or areas that you don't want to use anymore. You can click on the crop tool, and that allows you to crop your image like that if you'd like. Okay, but again, as I mentioned earlier, make sure you know the size of your perspective before you start drawing or making your perspective in Photoshop. Okay. You can always make your drawing bigger in Photoshop because you can shrink it, and that won't change the quality of your drawings, but you should never draw it smaller and have it stretched. Right. So once your image is in, you'll notice that every time you add like a new drawing or an image, it creates a new layer. So very similar to Illustrator, you can double click on your layer and rename it if you'd like. This background layer, you're not going to be able to delete ever, okay? But you can hide it if you'd like. Okay. So also with the base, the lock options are a little different here. Okay, these are your lock options, and to be really honest, you're only going to be using this one, which locks everything on that layer. Okay. If you need to add layers, you're going to go to the bottom right corner of your panel and add layers. If you want to delete them, you can use the trash can icon. So it should be really easy for you to navigate around Photoshop if you know Illustrator pretty well. Okay. Just a couple of other comments about the tools. You don't have the option to do a stroke in Photoshop. So these two icons at the bottom here, which were originally fill and stroke in Illustrator, they're just foreground color and background color now. Okay, so slightly different. Okay, so editing photos. Now you're going to use Google a lot for finding images, and what I suggest you do is, let's say you want honey locust tree, which is the type of tree that's in Paley Park. Okay, you can see I've already Googled it. You're going to add PNG to the end of that, whatever you're looking for. And what that does, it narrows down the search to already edited images. Okay. Sometimes it'll give you an image of whatever you're looking for in a very edited format, which is great. So you don't have to edit it. Sometimes it doesn't, in which you have no choice but to edit. But let's say you do type PNG. Oh, go to images. Okay, and it's going to give you all of the images it found. Okay, so typically what happens is that if the image is already edited and in a PNG file already, which is a Photoshop file, by the way, it'll have a gray background, not a white background. So if it has a white background and you like the image, and the size of the image is pretty high quality, then you can just download it and edit it. Okay, which is what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to go to View Image, right click, Save Image. Okay, and then I'm going to save it in a safe folder. Come back to my Photoshop. Go to the file that or the folder that I saved it in and open it. Okay. So to edit this image, what you're going to do first is before you touch anything, you're going to make a copy of this. Okay. So leave background image as it is, and then on your computer keyboard, press Command J or Control J, and what that does, it duplicates that layer, the background layer. Okay, I'm going to turn off the background layer or the visibility mode. Okay. And because the background is completely white and I only have one object, okay, what I can do is I can go to Select, scroll down to Color Range. Okay, and what color range does is it selects a specific color, so you don't have to go around erasing everything. It automatically selects that color for you. Okay, so the white part is what's selected. Okay, so the positive space, and then the black part is what's not selected, so the negative. Okay, and you can, the fuzziness means, basically, how much of this whiteness do you want to select, right? So the higher the fuzziness, the more of the white you're selecting, and the lower, obviously, the less. Okay, so play with the fuzziness a little bit until you're satisfied with the amount of white that you're selecting, and then click OK, and you'll see these marching ants that have selected the white part of your image. Okay, and then you can press delete on your keyboard, and that gets rid of all the white space in your image. Okay, and you can use this select color range tool for any color. Okay, not just white, but it just so happens that we need to get rid of the white space. Okay, so when you see like a gray and white checkered background, it means that it's transparent in Photoshop. Okay. And then at this point, with your image layer highlighted, you can go to your select tool right here. Okay, and then just select the entire image, Control Copy or Command Copy, go back to your perspective, and then Control V or Command V, and it'll transfer that image over, and it's going to be a new layer. So you can rename your layer, and obviously this tree is a little too small. Okay, and to resize it, I showed you before, Command T or Control T. If for some reason your keyboard is not working, you can go to Edit, scroll down to Free Transform, and it'll show that bounding box. Okay. Once again, press Shift on your keyboard to make sure that you're resizing your image proportionately. Okay. And you'll see, there's some, areas that we didn't quite get. So this is where you can use the eraser tool right here. Okay. For your eraser and your paint tools, you can right-click afterwards, and you'll get like a different set of or different kinds of brushes that you can use. If you don't like what's shown to you, you can go to the settings here. And then you can go to load brushes, or go to assorted brushes. It's completely up to you, and you can choose whatever brush you want to use. Okay. If you go to basic brushes, it gives you kind of the soft circular brush and the hard line circular brush. So these are probably more useful. Okay, and then you can erase any part that needs to be deleted. If you want to change the opacity of these images, you can go to your layers panel, and at the top there's an opacity setting, and you can set that to a setting that you want. Okay, and with trees, you're not going to be able to download millions of locust trees, so you can copy your trees over by pressing Alt on your keyboard. But just to give it an illusion that you didn't copy all of the trees on your site, what you can do is you can go back to Free Transform, okay, or Command T or Control T on your keyboard. And when that bounding box shows, you can right click and scroll down to Flip Horizontal. And what that does is it just mirrors it. Okay, and you can go in with your eraser if you'd like and kind of erase the areas that make it seem too obvious that you've duplicated your tree. You can choose different brushes that you can also download from online. Okay, so it makes it look more realistic. Okay, or you do have the option of downloading different locust trees or whatever trees that you want and then copying them over. That's completely up to you. Okay, facades. So in Paley Park, the facade here are bricks. So again, you can go back to your Google search engine and type in brick facade. Okay, and it gives you all of these options, and you can bring it in and edit them in here as well. Okay, the trees are pretty easy because you don't need to skew the images. Sorry, I'm just going to hide those layers. But let's say, for example, you have these walls that where you need to skew your image to make it look realistic. I'm gonna actually I've previously downloaded this. Okay, and I'm going to select it and transfer it over to, oops, too big. So anytime you want to resize anything, Command or Control T. And you can zoom in. Okay, let's say you want to lay this wall facade on this side of the structure. What you can do is, because you can't see the lines behind this brick layer, I'm going to lower the opacity for this layer a little bit so you can see, so I can see. Okay, and I actually think the width of this wall is a little too big, so I can select the area I want to delete and press delete on my keyboard. Okay, and I'm going to bring back the transform tool, line it up, at least one corner. Okay, now here you're going to press Command on your keyboard on Macs. On PCs, might be Control. If someone is using PC and knows exactly which key it is, please let me know. Okay, and what that does, it allows you to select only one anchor point and edit it. Okay. Like that. Okay, so once again, Free Transform tool here under Edit, or Control T or Command T on your keyboard. Okay, and you're going to press Command or Control to be able to select these anchor points individually. Okay, and then edit them. And then once you're done editing, you can just press enter on your keyboard. You can go back to the opacity setting and make it a little more opaque. Oops, sorry. Okay, so you can see where, you know, having an image bank would come in really handy. You know, you don't need to go on Google every time if you have like a bunch of, you know, different facades already downloaded and edited in your computer. You can just pull it out and edit it if you need to put it into your drawings. Like that. Okay, so it does take some time for you to, you know, create a perspective drawing. So just keep in mind, keep that in mind, and never start your perspective the day before it's due. Okay, that's my tip for you. Never. So you'll actually see that this tree shouldn't be covered by this this brick wall, and that's simply because the layer is behind the brick facade layer. So you can just click on that layer and bring it to the front. Really easy, and this is really important especially in your perspectives in Photoshop, because it might look awkward if you don't have your layers all set in place. Okay, so make sure that you kind of zoom out once in a while to get like a large, kind of broader view of your perspective, and make sure everything's, you know, every layer is in the right place and such. Okay. Also, you know, the waterfall, you can again go back to. Now, I'm cheating a little here because this park is already built. And I can, you know, Google the waterfall, right? And then select the image that I like, and then come back to Photoshop and edit it. I think I have it here too. Here we go. Right, now this is a little bit at an angle, but that's okay. I'm not going to use the entire image. I'm just going to select a part of this image and use that. Okay, so let's say I just want to use this part. I'm going to copy it over to my perspective. I'm actually going to turn off the trees again. Here we go, zoom in. Now, so the reason why I put the people here is just for reference, okay, for scale. So you might want to do that in your drawings as well. So the waterfall is a little too small because it's supposed to take up this entire area. So what I'm going to do is use the free transform tool to kind of edit the waterfall a little bit so it doesn't look as huge. And then here is where you can use the clone tool or the stamp tool. So it's right here in your tool bar. Okay, and what that does, it copies certain elements of your image and clones it. And you'll see what I mean. So once you have that stamp selected, you're going to press Alt on your keyboard, and you'll see this kind of like target icon shows up. And you're going to choose the area of your image that you want to clone. Okay, so let's say I want to start from here. I'm going to click, move over to where I want to start drawing. Okay, and what that does is it clones that area. Okay, so if you have, you know, if you really like a certain material or image that you find in Google, but it's really small, you might want to use this technique to see how it looks when it's cloned. Sometimes that works, but try to, again, download images that are high quality. That's probably best. In whatever areas you don't need, you can use the lasso tool. So this one right here. Okay, trace, or not trace, or select the images that I don't want and delete. Okay. Now, if you zoom in, it looks fine, but if you zoom out and you turn on, your tree layers, it might look kind of, blurred out, or not as, it doesn't stand out as much. So if you want a certain object or image in your Photoshop file to stand out, you can go to Image, Adjustments. Sorry, do I have to select that? Yes. You can go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast. Okay, and you have these toggles, so you can determine the brightness of that layer. So if you look at the waterfall image right now, as I'm moving toggle back and forth, so you can make it brighter, darker. You can play with the contrast. Okay, like that. Now, so that tool, the brightness and contrast tool, refers to the entire image. If you only want to brighten some parts of the image and darken the other parts, you can use the dodge and burn tool, which is right here. It kind of looks like a lollipop. Okay. So the lollipop icon is the dodge tool, which means to brighten. Okay, and if you click and hold that icon, you'll see a burn tool right below it. Okay, it's like a hand. Okay, so the burn tool makes parts of the image darker. Okay. So let's say you chose the burn tool. It's going to give you like a brush like this, and it's going to lightly brush over the areas that you want to darken. Okay. If you want to lighten, you're going to select the dodge tool. If the icon is too big, or if your brush is too big, just right click and toggle the size a little bit. Okay, and then lightly brush over while clicking on your mouse to lighten parts of that image. Okay, I'm going to do the same for my trees. I'm going to brighten, the top a little bit, and that brings a more kind of dramatic effect to your images. Okay, and you can go to Image and Adjustments again, Brightness and Contrast. Okay, play with those settings a bit. So basically what you want at the end of the day is to make sure that your image looks coherent. It looks like all of the elements belong in one space. Okay, and then afterwards, the last element that you want to add are people, right? You want lots of people using your design space. Just gonna, let's say, so these are already edited, but let's say, I gotta go back to Google. Oh, my internet's not working. Okay, I'm just gonna choose a random one. Okay, so let's say I brought in this image from Google. Okay, the editing style is exactly the same, but this time, the background is not one color as it was before with the tree. To edit this kind of image, again, you're going to press Command J. Okay, so you're going to make a copy of that image. And then you're going to use the pen tool right here. It looks exactly the same as a pen tool in Illustrator. Okay, you're going to zoom in and then begin tracing your person. Okay, you want to be as accurate as possible, so it does take some time. Hair, unfortunately, is a little more difficult, so you can just be a little more rough with that. I'm going to do this very quickly, but when you do this, please be a little more accurate and precise. Okay, so once again, if you want curves, you're going to click and drag your mouse. If you want straight lines, you're just going to click. Let's do this very quickly. Okay, I'm just going to be very rough here, guys. So now, like, you see the importance of having edited images in your image bank. So you don't have to do this every time you need a person in your perspective. Okay, and then you're going to come back to your original starting point. There we go. Okay. And then once you hover over that original starting point, you're going to see that circle again right beside your cursor, which means that you're closing that selection. And then you're going to right click and click on Make Selection and press OK, and you're going to get that marching ants again. Okay. Now at this point, what you want to do is get rid of the background, but you have your person selected. Okay. So you're going to go to Select, Inverse, and what that does is it selects the background, so everything but the person. Okay, and then press Delete. Okay, so now you have an edited version of this person sitting. Okay, I'm going to take my selection tool, select the person, and copy and paste her over to my perspective drawing, and then I'm going to resize her, obviously, because she's too big. And I'm going to make her sit right over here. Like that. Okay, so again, lower the opacity. Okay. Now, depending on your style of perspective, some people, like myself, choose to make the people in the perspective a little more kind of desaturated, so a little more gray toned. So if you want to do that, you can select the person. Okay, go to Image, Adjustments, scroll down to Hue and Saturation, and the saturation toggle, you can just lower that a little bit. And what that does is it gradually gets rid of the color on the image that you've chosen. Okay, and then you can click OK once you're satisfied. Okay. And you can do that to all the people that you bring in. So with people, make sure that you're consistent. If you decide to make, to make all of your people, less saturated, then do that to everyone in your site. Don't make some people more colored than others unless you have a specific reason to do so. Okay, again, that's just to make sure that your image looks cohesive. Okay, now shadows. Shadows are really easy to create as long as you use the right tools. So let's say you want to create a shadow for this tree. What you're going to do is you're going to copy it over or duplicate it by pressing Alt, click and drag. Okay. And then again, you're going to use your free transform tool to do that. But before that, you're going to make this image completely black. Okay. So to do that, go to Image, Adjustments, Levels. Okay. And use a toggle on the right side and drag it all the way over to the left. Okay. Lower the opacity because a shadow is probably never that strong. And then to get rid of these hard edged lines, you're going to blur it a little bit. And to do that, you go to Filter, Blur. Okay. And you have all of these choices, but I usually use the Gaussian blur. Okay. And then you can set the settings. I know it's a little more difficult to see, but so again, use the toggle to determine, the blur setting. That looks pretty good. Press OK. And then you're going to use your free transform tool again. So Control T or Command T, and then just going to flip it upside down. Okay, and depending on the direction of your sun, you want to, let's say it's coming from behind this tree here. You can just line the base. Okay. Or if you want to, make it a little more diagonal and an angle, again, you can press the Command or Control button on your keyboard so that you can edit that bounding box. Okay, and then you can copy this over for this tree as well. And press Enter once you're done editing. Okay. Just make sure that these shadows are under the layers of your actual trees so that the shadows are not covering your trees. Okay, you can do the same for people. And once you're done, you'll have something like, give it a minute. Like this. Okay, so once you have covered every surface of your drawing, okay, and you just keep working in layers, make sure that your layers are all named. Okay, as you can see, you'll build up hundreds of layers once you're, or maybe not this one, but for some of your drawings that are more complicated than others, you'll have hundreds of layers. So you want to be able to find your layers easily. So make sure you have them named. Okay. It's really good to play with the opacity setting. As you can see, like this image, if it was at 100%, it'll create a different effect, right? So typically in landscape architecture perspectives, you'll realize that whatever's in the foreground has a bit of a transparency to it, so you can see whatever's in the back. Okay. Again, with people, you want to make sure that you be consistent with the the colorings. Some drawings, you can make the people like completely white, and that's the same tool. So Image, Adjustments, Levels. But instead of bringing the right toggle to the left, which makes it completely black, you're going to do the opposite. Okay, and now your image is completely like white. Okay, and if you're going to do that for all the people in your drawing. Okay, and the reason why people do that is because they don't want to put so much stress on the people themselves. They just want them, like the silhouettes, to be there. They want the focus to be more on the design of the site. That's completely up to you though. Any questions so far? Yes.
So what are we supposed to sketch?
I think the assignment, as Nadia mentioned, is for you to go anywhere on campus or basically anywhere like around your house and sketch a perspective. So buildings, trees, add some people for scale. She'll explain.
So yeah, on the assignment 1C, just read that over. You pick any site that's on campus, like I mentioned before, similar to the size of Hilly Park, and you make a sketch. So Catherine used the SketchUp basic model as a base. As I mentioned before, you're going to use your hand sketch. Okay, so you're going to go anywhere on campus. If you see a courtyard, do a couple of sketches and pick one of those sketches as your final one that you're using as a base. Okay? Who asked the question? Who was that? Oh, yeah, so use any, okay? Any other questions?
Just another tip, it's when you're sketching your perspectives, it's good to add like a person so that you know the scale, right? You don't want your trees to be this big and your people to be this big in your perspectives. Just to make sure that you add a person in your drawing somewhere so you know the proportions and the scales of all the elements on your site.
And sometimes too, when I'm doing quick sketches, if you want to make it more precise, you can even take a photograph of it and look back and forth from your photograph, or kind of use that as a base too to help you with the sketching. Okay, so again, it's not, you're not using Pili Park. I don't want you to have perspective of Pili Park. Just please make sure you read over your assignment that 1C is your own hand sketch around campus. Okay, is that clear with everyone?